Do you think China would be so magnanimous sitting in India? I have my doubts. In such a situation, are they okay with other powers in Asia rising at the same time as they are?
欢迎来到胤蓝智库。当西方世界都在焦虑地防范一个所谓不断扩张的中国时，顶级纪元学者却抛出了一个极其反直觉的判断：中国骨子里根本没有向外扩张的继国基因，其战略底色是建起高墙，维持内部的绝对稳定。而印度试图借美国示农来牵制中国的做法，从一开始就陷入了战略误判。在今天我们要拆解的这场重磅访谈中，新加坡前外长、资深地缘政治学者杨荣文面对印度主持人的步步紧逼，给出了极其冷静甚至冷酷的现实主义剖析。首先，他直接戳破了西方的技术陷阱叙事。他一针见血地指出，真正会剥夺他国数据主权的恰恰是美国的闭源系统。其次，他检透了中印博弈的本质。印度之前的地缘投机正随着俄乌冲突的演变回归于现实，并开始重新寻找平衡。最后，针对未来达赖喇嘛圆寂后的法统之争，他揭示了历史底线。这从来不是纯粹的宗教问题，而是绝对的政治主权博弈。大国较量的终局将如何重塑亚洲？接下来，胤蓝智库带你聆听这场紧急思想的碰撞，请看正片。
When you said a rising China for ASEAN nations and ASEAN +6 as well, see, I look at it the way that America was rather generous for the better part of the century with other powers to go along with it. China's rise is also a testament to that the sole superpower there, America, let China grow and build these capabilities without being too coercive. Do you think China would be so magnanimous sitting in India? I have my doubts.
Well, I think the Chinese have a long history. They've always had paper, they record everything. And it's not possible in any conversation in China not to make repeated references to historical experiences. China is therefore quite predictable, and it is a conservative power because of its long recorded history. And its instincts are to maintain its homogeneity. The Chinese don't want to be like France or Great Britain or America, where in creating an empire, you bring the external proletariat into your internal domains. So if you look at London, Paris, New York, sometimes you wonder where the white people are. But in China, it's a very different feeling in Shanghai or Beijing or Guangzhou or Chongqing. They're homogeneous and they like being homogeneous. I mean, the whole of China, which has twice the population of Europe, has only one literature, one written language. A Chinese primary school student can recite the Analects from Confucius, written over 2,000 years ago, with little difficulty. This is how stable the civilization is. And the mentality is always to build walls around itself. You don't build walls to attack others. You build walls to maintain yourself. Sometimes when you go to China, and I go there very often, I must have been there 10 times in the last 1 year, you feel that they can get on with the rest of the world without the rest of the world. Sorry, they can get on with their lives without the rest of the world. So in India, I understand that there are anti-Chinese feelings, especially after Gao won. I don't think they will continue because historically between India and China, there's been no history of antipathy. And people don't hate each other. They may dislike each other's governments or systems, but ordinary Chinese don't dislike Indians. Ordinary Indians don't like Chinese. All Chinese know that Buddha came from India, but they see him as Chinese, you know. They see Avalokiteshvara, they know he's Indian, but he's venerated everywhere in China as a Chinese.
Yes. And I'm actually going to ask you about the Buddhist question because that I see that as an eventual flashpoint when the current Dalai Lama eventually passes and the succession begins, the process begins for the 15th Dalai Lama. So I'll ask you that. But fundamentally, Mr. Yo, what you were saying, that they're very inward looking, they're very homogenous, they believe in a clean, linear way of thinking, right? Do you think China would be so magnanimous? Sitting in India, I have my doubts. In such a situation, are they?
China, even in its classical period, under the Tang Dynasty, they lived in a multipolar world. They've always accepted the reality of a multipolar world. They've always had more neighbors than any other major power on the planet. They've elaborated a very skillful statecraft to handle multiple problems on these borders at the same time. But do they have a wish to incorporate 1 million Indians or 1 million Russians or 1 million Southeast Asians into the domain? I doubt it. In a crisis, the foreigners leave.
Yeah, COVID.
And then they come back. Then they leave again. So you find all Hindu communities in China in previous dynasties, they came, they left, they came back, they left again, following the cycles of Chinese history. No, I don't think China is an expansionist power. Of course, you have border problems. They have border problems with Russia, and they came to blows over it. It's a longer border than with India, but they've since cleaned it up. It's no longer an issue. One day, the border of India will also be cleaned up. And with India, it's more complicated because between the Raj and dynastic China, there was never any delineation. I mean, we talk about the McMahon line, but the McMahon line was delineated with the local Tibetan government at a time when London accepted Beijing as suzerain. So in the Chinese mind, it has no legal validity. So I think both sides will, in the end, take a practical approach.
Spoken like a true Singapore statesman, always making sure that India and China work together. How do you see, you have delineated your thoughts in a new Panchil 2.0 sort of thing? First of all, Mr. Yo, Panchil, it brings up PTSD memories of, the first Panchil, which eventually led to an India-China war of 62. What would this new age Panchil 2.0 look with greater India-China cooperation?
No, I won't say that Panchil led to the war. Panchil would have developed but for the war. And despite the war, both sides in their worldview have never departed from Panchil. I mean, I don't see India invading other countries. I don't see India wanting to impose Indianness onto other societies. Of course, India will have its influence. You will always have its aura, its mandala spreading well beyond India. So to China. And Southeast Asia, when the two mandalas overlap. And in their overlap, they created the Bandung Declaration.
Yes.
Which at its heart was Panchil. So it's a Western view which is very foreign to us, that you live, I die. I live, you must die. And the borders are hard. And that either my values prevail or your values prevail. I don't think you find that in Hinduism. We don't find that in Chinese philosophy. We can have multiple values and still be ourselves.
How do you see a Panchil 2.0 in this age of, AI and this great arms race over artificial intelligence? China is right at the cusp. I mean, some of its models either better than or as good as American closed models.
There's a time when the Americans felt so advanced in AI that no one could ever catch up. I remember what Sam Altman, OpenAI, said to Indian businessmen.
Don't make frontier lab.
India, don't waste your time. You can never catch up. Then China came up with DeepSeek, and China made it open source, which means that, hey, even Singapore can make use of large language models and retain our own confidentiality and data security, a certain degree of AI sovereignty. So I don't see one AI mega power in the world. I see a proliferation of AI everywhere. And sometimes it will grow exponentially, it will become viral. Then it meets countervailing power. So you remember just a couple of weeks ago, a model in OpenAI's sandbox escaped.
Yep.
And then pummeled Hugging Face with tens of thousands of questions. And Hugging Face tried to use American modules models to subdue this virus, but they could not because they were all under similar guardrails. And this virus has already escaped guardrails. So in the end, Hugging Face had to use a Chinese model to subdue this Frankenstein. In the same way, there'll be Frankensteins emanating from China, and we may need American models, or maybe in the future Indian models to subdue it. In a sense, it'd be like a biological war, where tumors may grow, epidemics may grow, but in the end, they find their limits. Because intelligence in the biological world is distributed. I see the same thing happening in AI. I don't believe in the singularity of there being one godlike system which controls all of us. This is the current Silicon Valley God complex.
Yeah.
It is approaching hubris.
Tell me this. This is a perception that I feel, and it also stems from the way Chinese diplomacy used to happen for the last couple of decades. This debt trap diplomacy, where loans were given, and eventually some sort of sovereignty was given in lieu if loans weren't paid up on time. That's the worry with these open source models by China, where companies, if they use these open models by China, which are remarkably cheaper than American closed models, that companies that are using those open models will lose their alpha to these Chinese, and China will come up with competing companies like that. Is that perception valid?
No. In fact, that perception is being deliberately promoted as part of information warfare by the West against China. You are more likely to lose your alpha to a closed system like Anthropic or OpenAI than to a Chinese system, which by definition cannot control your alpha. And interestingly, this was what the CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, has been saying. He said, you don't lose your alpha by relying on closed systems. You need to control your own application layer so that what data you don't want to share, you can keep, for which you will need open source. So it's the opposite. If India wants to keep its alpha, it needs to go open source. In the immediate period, it may have to rely on Chinese open source models, and I don't see anything wrong with that. But your objective must be eventually to have your own and to achieve a degree of AI sovereignty. You can't do that with American systems.
Mr. Yeo, tell me so with all this that you've just delineated about the war, the AI war, it's not a war, it's a race, an arms race, let's put it that way. What do you think that Mr. Xi Jinping and Mr. Narendra Modi right now are thinking? I don't know if they're talking as candidly as maybe you and I are, but what are they thinking when they see what America is doing right now with its hard power as well as its soft power? And how do you think they're framing their strategy for the next 10 years?
No, actually, India-China relations were proceeding quite well. Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping had met many times in many places, and always with utmost courtesy and with the view that the world is big enough to accommodate both India and China and many other powers. It was only after Gaowan that relations suddenly took a sharp turning for the worse. And it was partly the result of maybe opportunism that, since America is against China, maybe we also turn against China, we ally of America, then India can gain many benefits. And America dangled this carrot before India. But since the Ukraine war broke out, and then India had this air battle with Pakistan, it's quite clear that each side calculates in its own self-interest that this romance is not a true romance, it's just an adult relationship. we are here, okay, but it's daylight, we are
exactly
going on with our own life, And India will stay true to Russia because Russia is an old friend. And the US has its own agenda in Europe and the Middle East. India shares some of them, India doesn't share all of them. So I see India now gradually retriangulating in order to have a more normal relationship with China. The Chinese are also understanding the dynamics involved, making it easier for this future to be brought forward. And I see step by step the pilgrimage to Kailash reopened, the 3 mountain passes just reopened for trade. more direct flights. In China, I see many Indian business people now. And when I go to India, so many questions to me about China. So I see the ice cracking.
I just want to come back to the Hormuz question. Essentially, you saw you saw seeing this flashpoint. It's not even a choke point; it's a flashpoint now over there. When you look at that and you look at the Straits of Malacca sitting over there, what is quantifiably different between both the straits? And do you have any worry that this could also be weaponized, the Malacca Straits ever?
No, of course. In fact, I was in the military before. And one scenario which we cannot escape is the blockading of the Straits of Malacca and the Straits of Singapore. I mean, three countries control the Straits of Malacca and Singapore: Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. But beyond that, there's the South China Sea in one direction, and there's the Andaman Sea and the Bay of Bengal in the other direction. If we start playing games and adding friction, hey, others can do the same. Then how does it benefit us? So all of us would much rather prefer an open regime where there is freedom of peaceful navigation. We facilitate trade, we don't impede trade. And this was the Straits of Hormuz before Iran was attacked. But if we put ourselves in Iran's position, if you are attacked and your leaders are decapitated, then of course, every means at your disposal, you will have to use to defend yourself. So this is the situation where we are in. Can we go back to that past? I doubt it, because there's so much hurt, so much distrust. So a practical way must be found forward. But I will not use the Straits of Hormuz as a template in our own region. There'll be madness. But if one day a major power were to attack Indonesia or Malaysia or Singapore and decapitate these leaders, then will they then do something about the freedom of navigation of ships from the aggressive power? Oh, I think we would, in desperation.
So when you look at this idea between Iran and Oman talking about some sort of fee, and they model it after the way the Malacca Straits fee is done, MSP, the Malacca Straits Patrol fee is done, is there equivalence over there, or is this completely different?
We were used to a world where there was international law, international regulations, and all these matters were depoliticized. Increasingly, they have been weaponized, and increasingly by the Americans themselves, who were the original guardians. So we're into a new world, and we better make sure that in our own region, what you call ASEAN plus 6, that among us there's a common understanding that is in our collective interest to have freedom of navigation between the two oceans, which means China, ASEAN, and India.
Right.
That is entirely in our own interest. We don't want to learn from the Middle East. We'd rather they learn from us.
I want to ask you about, now I want to go back to the Buddhism part earlier in our interview. Now I want to bring that in. Now, see, I foresee a potential flashpoint over here when eventually the question about the 15th Dalai Lama comes in. How do you see all of this panning out? Do you have a situation where Dalai Lama A is appointed by China, and then you have a Dalai Lama B appointed by the Tibetan religious institutions over here in India? What happens then in that situation? And sorry, before you answer, I also say we are noticing also sustained efforts by China to claim heritage over the Buddhist religion and faith as well. It's a very Chinese thing as well. So how do you see that pan out?
No, when Buddhism went to China, the Chinese mandarins were full of misgivings. In fact, when emperors dabbled too much in religion, they were criticized by officials, and these officials were punished. But in the end, the Confucianist mindset prevailed, which is those who govern a vast country should not dabble in religion, because this will create all kinds of other problems. So when Buddhism entered China, the mandarins created a system where the monks were to be kept in monasteries and temples. You don't interfere in political affairs. But On the Tibetan highlands, the High Lamas, they perform a dual role of being religious power and political power. And for this reason, for centuries, the incarnation of High Lamas on the Tibetan plateau had to be approved by the Emperor of China. This went back to the Ming Dynasty. And even the Dalai Lama's own accession had to be approved by Chiang Kai-shek's government. I mean, that's part of history. And whoever becomes the next Dalai Lama will have to be approved by Beijing. Now, he may be reincarnated, one may be reincarnated outside China, but I don't think it will have much impact.
Well, do you think but Mr. Yao, but do you think that will have acceptability just because there is political sovereignty over the region, right? You're talking about approval by Beijing, but would that assuage the concerns of believers? For example, someone sitting in Myanmar, Thailand, or Cambodia, would they recognize a Dalai Lama appointed by the Tibetan system in India or by the CCP government sitting in Beijing?
Well, the current Dalai Lama, I mean, he enjoys a certain prestige as followers all over because he was from China. I mean, the CIA helped to arrange for his escape to India from Mustang. I mean, that's all part of history. And it was in the interest of America at the time to create something outside China in order to create an inconvenience to China, which can be used against China at an appropriate time. They do that in Xinjiang, they do that in many countries. And of course, China dislikes it. And this has become a problem between China and India. But if you go to Tibet, and you go to the monasteries there, and the infrastructure there, life goes on. So you look at the last Panchen Lama, when he died, there was a reincarnation which was managed by a High Lama in Beijing. And later on, the Chinese government found out that this High Lama was in contact with the Dalai Lama. So they abrogated the entire process. And what did they do?
They disappeared that kid.
欢迎回到胤蓝智库。这段充满讥讽的对话，完全撬出了西方媒体的议程设境，用大历史视角对现实进行了降维打击。这里有3个极具穿透力的几层逻辑。第一，扩张性帝国与内敛型文明的认知错位。大英帝国或美国的崛起，伴随着对外同化与扩张，而中国是一个极度看重内部秩序与同质性的文明，应防范西方霸权的旧思维去防范中国，本身就是方向性误判。第二，科技主权的现实悖论。西方不断渲染中国人工智能开源技术的威胁，但残酷的现实是，发展中国家要想真正掌握核心的算法优势，出路恰恰是利用开源生态。相反，拥抱美国的闭源系统，本质上就是向数据霸权交出自己的底牌。第三，宗教外衣下的地缘主权法则。关于未来宗教法统之中，西方试图在海外建立精神领袖，作为牵制中国的筹码，但这在绝对的国家实力与历史法统面前显得极为苍白。几百年前，清朝的金瓶制签早已将此制度化，应有完整的议轨与国家机器背书的继任者，最终必然会被务实的国际社会所接受。因为国际社会的核心法则终究是对现实权利的承认。归根结底，在一个加速走向多极化的世界里，盲从西方的情绪化叙事只会沦为炮灰。对于棋局中的国家而言，少一些纪元机构，多一些基于现实利益的考量，才是真正的生存之道。你是如何看待亚洲多极化秩序的科技与地缘博弈？欢迎在评论区留下你深刻的见解。感谢收看本期的胤蓝智库，请订阅我们的频道。我们下期深度分析，下期见。